John is the Dean of Mathematics, Statistics, and Data Science at Montgomery College and co-chairs the Achieving the Dream team here at the college. John has been at Montgomery College since 2006, serving as professor and chair prior to becoming the dean. John has been active in the Mathematical Association of America, serving as chair of the Maryland, DC, and Virginia section. In 2001, he won the Montgomery College Outstanding Service Award, and in 2012, he was recognized by NESOD Excellence Award and as the Maryland Professor of the Year. He loves data and loves sharing it with all who will listen and many who don't listen. Please welcome John Hamman.
I'm here to talk a little bit about data, right? So I know that now that you've been here for a little while, you're getting excited for this, right? This is what I think the highlight of today is going to be. But I have to warn you a little bit ahead of time. I've got slides and I've got, I don't know, about 150 numbers to share with you in about 6 words, right? So we're going to walk through them slow, right? So you'll get to enjoy them. But I want to start out by giving a shout out to my friends in OIRE, Brian Alt and Bo Chan, who provided me with a lot of numbers here that we could really kind of look through. What I want to do is not just have a presentation about some numbers, though. I really want to kind of talk about equity, and one of the things I want to do is talk about, well, how do we measure equity, right? That's one of the things that Dr. Williams had talked about, before. And I'm going to kind of present 2 different ways in which we can look at these numbers and talk about some equity and some things that the college is doing, and I hope we'll end a little bit optimistically with some things that are going to be coming along. Right, so the first thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about kind of race, ethnicity, and we are limited in our, I think, language to talk about that here at the college because we have to have kind of these sets categories in which we ask students, right? We have these kind of iPad categories that are given to us. They're not the ways that I would talk about race or ethnicity if I got to choose the categories, but that's the reporting mechanism that we have. What I've done is, instead of trying to look at kind of all the different categories that we have for race and ethnicity, I looked at our top 4, which are the Asian, Black, Hispanic, and White, which make up over 80-some% of our students. The reason I want to do that is kind of twofold, right? One, it allows us to kind of focus on what where most of our students are falling, but it also makes it so that we can look at trends over time that aren't quite so volatile. When you have small populations, we start to look at percentages, they become very volatile, right? 1 or 2 students do more or less, and things change quite dramatically. So for Asians, right, the percentages have hovered 11 to 12%. For our Black students, it's 28, 27. For Hispanic, it's 24 to 25, and for White, it's 23. That's percent of the students in each year that are fall into those groups. Then what I want to do is look a little bit about completion, right? So if I now talk a little bit about certificate completion, degree completion, and our transfer, I want to take a similar metric. And what I want to do is to talk about, since I know out of all of our students, about 12% are Asian, but if I, for example, look at our certificate completion, right, what I see there is that the certificate percentages don't match up quite with our students, right? So this is one way that I want us to start to think about equity, right? So I want to be clear about what these 2 columns of numbers are showing, right? So that first column is saying that of the students here in Fall 17, 12% of them are Asian, and on down. And that second column, of all the certificates we awarded in this last year, 10% of them went to Asian students, right? So one way to define equity would be to say those should match, meaning that 12% of our certificates should be Asian, 27% of our certificates should go to Black students, all the way down. And you can see that doesn't quite match up. Likewise, when we look at degrees, right, and now I'm talking about associate's degrees of any sort, right, there's not matching up, right? In some sense, they're closer. Some of them are closer. Some of them are farther apart, right? But that distinction there between what the degrees are and what the population parameters are. And lastly, I want to say the same thing about transfer, right? So one idea to think about equity is in each case here, that blue bar should be where we start, and then the other bar should line up with it, right? so that we're awarding the same percentage of certificates to what our populations are, likewise degrees and transfer. This right here, I'd have to say, is probably, to steal the words from Yuri Treisman from the Dana Center, is probably the most admired problem in higher ed, right? And what I mean by that is we often go to conferences or talk about this and put these up here, and we all kind of look back and just look at it, right? We admire it a little bit, and we say, that's a problem, right? But then this kind of idea of the call to action, what do we do with that is the much trickier part, right? So what I want to do instead is to take another look at how we could think about and measure equity. So instead of having the total number of certificates here, right, and saying, oh, well, you know, all the transfer students, 15 of them were Asian, what I'd like to do is to start with a particular group and track them over time. So look at a group of, you know, students that started here, and then see, out of all the Asian students that started here, what percent of them got certificates, what percent of them got degrees, what, you know, percent got transfer. So I want to start with kind of a different way of looking. And so I just went back and grabbed some data for some students we have for kind of a long tracking of time. So I started back in fall 12 just as a place to have a baseline, right? So one of the things that we could look at there is we could look at their GPA in the first semester, right? And you can see there's some differences there, right? But it's hard to suss out much difference here between a first semester GPA. But then we looked at, you know, the retention rate from that first semester to the second semester, right? And we see that, you know, the gaps aren't very wide at that very beginning point, right? So they're coming here with, you know, some similarities in the GPAs. They're coming back the second semester with some similarities. When we look at Gateway English, and what I mean by that is the percentage of students from each of these groups that pass a college-level English class in their first year, okay? And that's where we start to see some differences, right? Now I start to see some gaps in there that are pretty substantial, right? And in that first college-level English class within that first year. Already, that's indicative. Math, we see some even bigger differences for what's going on there. And the Gateway both just means for those that complete both math and English within their first year. And we see some, I'm going to say, shockingly low numbers, especially if you're not used to looking at this data, right? It's not the way we think of for our students. And then the reason I took something back for 12 is I want to look at to see how many eventually graduated transfer all the way up until, you know, this last fall, right? So any time they graduate, none of this, you know, cohort tracking for a few years. And we'll see that given them kind of as much time as we want, 7 years here, there are some differences in the graduation rates and the transfer rates, right? So, again, this is a little bit of just that admiration problem. I look back at this and say, well, gosh, that's not good, right? And I see the differences. What can we do? Well, what I want to do now is to try to think, well, we have made some real changes, right? So one of the things that we have done is we've started working with ATD, we've started thinking about equity, we've made some real changes to how we are looking at students and how we're tracking students, right? So there's been a mandate to kind of look at the students that started this last fall and to really see if we can improve the graduation and transfer rates. So what I want to do now is to give you some early data for these students who started here just this fall to see what we're doing in terms of these metrics, right? And so I'm just repeating, right? This first column is the first semester GPA back in fall 12, compared to now the first semester GPA for the students who started last fall. And I see some dips, right? So I'm a little concerned about that, but I think I got some explanation for that. Part of that is we've done some changes, and I can talk more about that. But then if we look at fall to spring retention, I actually am seeing some things that make me pretty happy, right? I mean, we're seeing both high retention and the absolute difference there is better, right? So this is you know, I think a step in the right direction, right? But now I want to kind of go through and see what has happened with these gateway courses, right? This is all the data that we're going to be able to have for this cohort because these are the students that are still in our classes, right, in this building right now, right? There are students sitting in their gateway English classes today as we're sitting in here, and I'm seeing some numbers, right? But I should be hearing an audible gasp here, right? This is really kind of impressive, right? So those numbers are bigger, right? That's easy to see. I can see that each of those numbers for the fall 18 cohort is bigger. But what's impressive is we are comparing the full year back in fall 12. to half a year for my fall 18 students, right? So in one semester, and I have to be slightly careful there, one semester and winter terms, right? But you know, halfway through the year, we're seeing that we've got more students through, right? This is a change for what we have been doing in our English. You know, we changed developmental. We put a focus on talking to students that we have to be making a difference here, right? So this is substantial, right? Likewise, in math, we've been doing this the same thing, right? We've really made a difference here in how we're talking to students, how we're you know, talking to them about getting into this, and asking them to take their math and English early. Getting through math and English early is a huge predictor of whether students will ultimately succeed or graduate, right? So having these things early and trying to not just get more students in, but get them in and have them be successful is our key to really changing what's happening here. And I'll lastly put up here, you know, those that have changed both math and English. So I am excited for the end of the semester, right? I mean, here in a few more weeks, I'm going to be able to say what has happened out of, you know, all the academic year. Now, because we're really doing first year, we'll include summers into that too, right? So by the time we really compare what's happening this year, I'm including all the students who are in class right now, as well as those who are going to take math and English over the summer. The reason I want to think about that is when I think about what can we do, this is one of those things that we can do, right? These metrics are not done yet, right? For this cohort, we can talk to students, right? And I don't mean just particular students or any students. I mean, we can talk to students and ask them what they have taken, what they're planning to take in summer one, what they're planning to take summer two, right? And really talk to them about the fact that getting math and English completed early can make a big difference in their ultimate graduation rates. The other thing that I really want you to think about is that these were not things that were kind of tweaked around the edges when they redesigned the English and the math redesigns. This really was a wholesale rebuilding. And I've been involved with some other, you know, changes we tried to do in math before that weren't quite successful. And I think there's two reasons why some things sometimes fail when we try to tweak around with them. One is that they can tend to be, you know, kind of small tweaks as opposed to really thinking about them a whole scale. But the other one is really about the equity. If you cannot take an existing course and try to retrofit equity around it, right? I mean, either they're designed with equity in mind or they're not equitable. Right. And in both cases, in both cases, when these redesigns were happening, they were thinking about all students, right? And that design of thinking about all students is what makes that impact, right? It's not trying to tweak or adjust something later, right? So I'm very pleased with you know, the progress we've made, right? So I'm showing the same data just graphically here, right? You can see that in each case, we're doing better right now, or better the same than we were previously. And certainly by the end of the year, we'll be doing better, right? So this is great progress. This is, of course, a step in the direction, right? Because, you know, as always, I can talk about my graphs, and you know, even though I'm happy about my graphs, my scale is a little bit low, right? I mean, I'm looking at, you know, highs of 25 to 30% over there. If I redo this to a scale where I'm talking about seeing 0 to 100, we got a lot of work to do, right? But on the equity piece, we're making progress, right? And we can keep working. So I know that we've made some kind of fundamental design changes thinking about equity in both the math and the English developmental courses, right? But my question to you is kind of, you know, what's next? You know, this is good, but it has to be a step along the way, right? We're not there yet. We have to keep doing this work, right? So we can keep measuring it. We have to keep thinking about what those changes are that we can make to keep improving equity here. Okay? And with that, I'll turn it back over.